Have you ever noticed the people you pass every day? The ones who seem invisible until suddenly they change the way you see the world. I suppose I never did, never noticed them until recently. Every morning, I drag myself out of my tiny apartment in Midtown Manhattan, heels clicking against the cracked pavement, earbuds in, playlists on loop. The city wakes up before me, even before my alarm. Horns honk, street vendors shout, and the smell of coffee and bagels hits me before I even open my door. It's the same chaos, the same rhythm, and I've learned to walk through it without really looking. Work has me by the wrists. I spend my days buried in spreadsheets and emails, answering calls I don't want to answer, and meetings that blur into each other like watercolors bleeding together. I used to love my job, I think. Somewhere beneath the deadlines, the PowerPoint presentations, and the never-ending to-do lists. I must have. Now it's just survival. And so, I survive. The bus stop on Fifth Avenue has become my little ritual, though I'm hardly conscious of it. I wait there every morning, under the awning, half watching the cars, half watching my phone, and almost never noticing anyone else. But there's one person I can't seem to ignore anymore. A man. An old man. He's always there. Every morning, same time, same bench, same worn coat and tilted hat. His hands, pale and trembling slightly, clutch a cup of coffee as if it were a lifeline. He looks like he's been waiting for something, or maybe for nothing at all. I have no idea what he's waiting for. And I realize in these brief seconds of noticing him that I've started to count on seeing him. Not in a conscious way, mind you, just in the background of my routine, like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I don't remember writing. I never speak to him. I'm polite enough. Small nods, polite, good morning that evaporate in the wind. But that's it. There's something about him that's quiet, solid, almost intimidating. Not because he's scary. He isn't, but because I've begun to sense that there is a depth there, a story I can't touch, a life I can't comprehend. Most mornings, I tell myself it's none of my business. I tell myself I have enough to deal with. My work, my friends, my rent, my never-ending lists. And yet, sometimes, when I step off the curb, my mind lingers on him. The way his eyes seem to look past me, past the bustling city, and somewhere I can't name. I suppose that's the thing about routine. You see, it blinds you. You move so fast, with your own problems and your own noise, that you forget to notice the quiet, small details of the world around you. The subtle gestures, the lives intersecting with yours, unseen yet present. It was raining the other day. Light drizzle that made the streets glisten. The city reflected in puddles like fractured glass. I was late for work, of course. Coffee in hand, umbrella barely keeping me dry. I barely noticed the old man at first, but then he looked up, caught my eye, and for a split second, I felt seen. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in that quiet, almost imperceptible way that makes you pause. "Morning," he said, his voice rough but warm. "Waiting for the bus?" I blinked, surprised. I muttered a small, "Yeah, seems like it's running late." He chuckled, a low, gravelly laugh that felt like it had seen too much. "Patience is the first lesson life teaches, though most of us learn it too late," he said. And I paused. Something about the weight in his voice, the certainty, the experience, stopped me in my tracks. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I noticed the faint lines etched into his face, the subtle tremor in his hands, the way his eyes, a pale shade of blue, seemed to hold entire lifetimes within them. That day, when the bus finally screeched around the corner, I didn't get on immediately. I stayed a moment longer, trying to wrap my mind around the strange, sudden curiosity that had taken hold of me. I wanted to know. I wanted to hear. I wanted to see. And I realized then, maybe this was the beginning of noticing, of understanding, of paying attention to the small, quiet lives moving alongside my own. I don't know his name. I don't know anything about him, really. But there's something comforting in the thought that he's there, day after day, a constant in a city that rarely allows anything to stay the same. And so I wait. I watch. I wonder. Maybe tomorrow I'll say more than good morning. Maybe tomorrow I'll ask him a question. Maybe tomorrow something will change. For now, I wait. It was one of those mornings where the sky hung low and gray, threatening rain, but never quite committing. I left my apartment with my umbrella tucked under my arm, hurrying along the familiar streets, earbuds in, half listening to a playlist I couldn't even remember the name of. Everything was routine, the same honking taxis, the same smells of fresh bagels and exhaust, the same hurried people walking as if the city were going to crumble behind them if they stopped even for a second. And there he was, the old man, as usual, sitting on the same bench at the bus stop. But this morning, something was different. Maybe it was the drizzle. Maybe it was the way the streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. Or maybe it was just me paying attention for once. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the city faded. It was just him and me and the quiet hum of life all around. "Morning, young lady," he said, his voice soft, yet somehow carrying authority. "Waiting for the bus too?" I blinked. I wasn't sure what to say. Usually, I only gave a polite nod, mumbling a quick "yeah" before looking away. But something about his tone, gentle, patient, and strangely compelling, made me stop and really listen. "Yeah," I said, finally, tucking a strand of wet hair behind my ear. "Seems like it's late again." He chuckled, a low, gravelly sound that somehow felt like laughter I had forgotten existed. "Patience is a funny thing," he said. "It teaches you, if you're willing to learn. Most of us, we don't." I looked at him more closely, really looked. His coat was worn but neat, his hat slightly frayed at the edges, and his hands trembled ever so slightly as he held the cup of coffee. But it wasn't frailty, it was history. Life had written itself into every line of his face, every crease around his eyes, every slow movement of his fingers. I found myself sitting down beside him, an impulse I didn't understand. My bus would come in a few minutes, and I should have been rushing, checking my emails, thinking about meetings. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. "Do you always come here?" I asked, my voice almost too soft to hear over the distant traffic. "Every morning," he replied simply. "Rain, shine, snow, doesn't matter. There's something about this spot. You see people, you hear stories if you pay attention. You learn stories," I echoed. He nodded, sipping his coffee slowly. "Stories. Some are loud, some are quiet, some are tragic, some are just lessons waiting for someone to notice. I've learned a few in my time. Maybe I can share a couple." I felt a strange warmth in my chest. This wasn't small talk. This wasn't idle chatter to pass the time. This was connection, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Would you like to hear one?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yes," I said, almost instinctively. He took a breath and began. I was a boy in the Midwest, he started. In a town so small, everyone knew everyone else's business, whether you wanted them to or not. When I was 18, I joined the army. War, it teaches you things, hard lessons. You see people die. You see friends vanish. You carry their absence with you. And you survive. Somehow you survive. And you realize the moments you almost forget are the moments that matter most. I listened, utterly silent. His words painted pictures in my mind. The flat plains of Kansas, the barracks, the distant echo of artillery. And yet, it wasn't about violence or fear. It was about resilience, about the ability to keep moving forward when every part of you wants to stop. The bus arrived, pulling up with a screech, its doors swinging open and closed. I didn't move. I didn't want to interrupt him. You've got to go, he said softly, noticing my hesitation. But remember this, the world is full of people rushing through their lives. Don't just rush. Notice the quiet. Notice the ones who've survived. Notice the lessons hidden in the ordinary. I nodded, my heart heavier than when I had arrived, but somehow lighter too. I stepped onto the bus slowly, glancing back at him. He waved, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but to me, it felt monumental. And as the bus pulled away, I realized I had just encountered something I hadn't even known I was missing. Someone who reminded me that life wasn't just about the emails, the meetings, the noise. It was about noticing, about listening, about connecting. For the first time in a long while, I felt awake. I couldn't stop thinking about him, the old man at the bus stop. His words lingered in my mind long after the bus carried me to the glass towers and fluorescent lights of my office. All day, I felt a quiet restlessness, a strange tug to return to that little bench, to hear more, to see more. So, the next morning, I did. I left a little earlier than usual, rain forgotten, coffee in hand, and found him exactly where he had been. Same coat, same hat, same cup of coffee, and that same calm, steady gaze that seemed to see things I didn't even know existed. Good morning, I said, unsure if I sounded polite or eager. Morning, Emily, he said, tilting his head with a faint smile. Somehow, he remembered my name. Ready for a story today? I nodded, and then he began. He spoke of his childhood first, in a town so small, he said, that everyone's life felt like a book open on a shelf. He told me about the dusty streets he used to run down, the small grocery store where his mother worked long hours, the neighbors who were more like extended family than strangers. I learned early, he said, that life doesn't wait. It pushes forward whether you're ready or not. And you have to push too, even when it's painful. Even when it hurts, then came the war. He described the enlistment as if it were a reluctant journey into the unknown. His words weren't dramatic, not in a Hollywood way, but precise and haunting. I could see the barracks in my mind, the endless marches, the faces of friends he had buried, the letters home that never arrived. He spoke of courage, not in loud acts, but in the quiet decisions to keep going, to hold someone's hand, to write a letter to a mother far away. I found myself leaning closer, drinking in every word. It was as if I could feel the weight of every memory pressing against him, shaping him, leaving faint scars and deep wisdom in equal measure. He paused for a moment, looking at the street, watching the pedestrians pass, the city moving around us like a river of faces. Emily, he said softly, the things we see every day, the bus stops, the people rushing, the streets we walk 1,000 times, they all hold stories. Stories of survival, of love, of quiet bravery. Sometimes it takes an outsider or a stranger to remind you to notice. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. He wasn't just telling stories. He was teaching me, guiding me. I felt a strange mix of awe, sadness, and gratitude. Here I was, a woman trapped in spreadsheets and office cubicles, and yet, through this man's words, I could glimpse a life so raw, so human, it made my own struggles feel smaller, yet more meaningful. Then he spoke of loss. He told me about his wife, long gone, the letters he never sent, the moments he had missed because he thought there would always be more time. He told me about friends who had vanished in ways he would never understand, and the grief that lingered, patient and persistent, like a shadow that never left. I won't lie to you, Emily, he said. Life hurts. It takes more than it gives sometimes, but it also teaches you things you can't learn any other way. Things you can carry with you, quietly. Every day I didn't know what to say. Words felt inadequate, and yet I felt compelled to speak. It's incredible, I whispered. I can't imagine what you've been through. He chuckled softly. You don't need to imagine. You just need to listen. And maybe notice the courage around you. Everyone has their own battles, their own stories. Some are loud, some are silent, but all matter. The bus arrived, late as usual, groaning to a stop. I didn't move immediately. I wanted to stay a little longer, just to breathe in the weight of his presence, the depth of his stories. Go, he said kindly, noticing my hesitation. But remember what I said. Life is not just what you chase. It's what you notice, what you hold, what you learn from those who came before you. I nodded, my chest heavy, but lighter at the same time. And as I stepped onto the bus, I felt a strange determination rising inside me, a desire to slow down, to notice, to connect, to truly live in the spaces I had been rushing through for so long. For the first time in years, I felt that life could be more than deadlines, meetings, and monotonous routines. It could be stories, lessons, moments of quiet bravery, and the strange, wonderful people who leave their mark on you when you least expect it. And I knew, even as the bus carried me away, that I would return tomorrow. I had to. There was more to hear, more to see, more to feel. The rain had stopped, but the city smelled damp and alive. I found myself walking faster than usual to the bus stop, anticipation knotting my stomach. By now, the old man was no longer just a fixture at the bench. He was a presence, a quiet anchor in my chaotic, unseeing life. Morning, Emily, he greeted me, as if he had been waiting. Ready for today's lesson? I smiled, feeling a flutter of something I hadn't felt in years. Curiosity, genuine excitement, maybe even hope. He shifted slightly, leaning on his cane, and began to speak. Life, he said, is a collection of lessons. Some come from loss, some from joy. Some come from people you never expect. But if you pay attention, Emily, you'll see them everywhere. I nodded, gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline. I wanted to absorb every word. Take patience, he continued. It's not just waiting for a bus or a call. It's learning to endure what you cannot change, to find peace in the small moments while still moving forward. You see it in children who never give up, in people who rebuild after everything is gone. Patience isn't passive. It's an act of courage. I thought about my own life, emails piling up, deadlines looming, friends I had neglected, moments I had rushed through. Had I been patient or just surviving? blindly, without noticing anything at all. He sipped his coffee and smiled, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. And kindness, he said, never underestimate it. A small gesture can change a life you'll never even know. Hold a door, smile at a stranger, share a cup of coffee with someone who looks alone. These aren't trivial acts. They're the threads that hold the world together. I imagined him, decades ago, doing small acts that seemed meaningless at the time, but left unseen ripples. I imagined the quiet power of humanity, unnoticed, yet enduring. Courage, Emily, he went on, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's getting out of bed when the world feels heavy. Sometimes it's forgiving when anger would be easier. Sometimes it's showing up for someone else, even when you feel broken. Most people never realize their own courage because it wears no badge. But it's there. Always I felt a lump in my throat. Each lesson he gave wasn't abstract. It was personal, embedded in his life, carved into his soul by years of survival and love and loss. I realized how little I had noticed my own life, how much of it I had passed by without understanding the lessons hidden in the ordinary. And Emily, he said softly, never forget the value of listening. Really listening. We're so busy speaking, explaining, defending. But listening, that's where understanding lives. Listening is where empathy begins. And empathy, he smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners, is what makes us human. I wanted to take these words, fold them into myself, keep them warm like a secret treasure. And somehow I knew I would. Because for the first time in a long while, I felt that my life had depth, that the everyday world had meaning, and that the simplest encounters could hold the most extraordinary lessons. The bus arrived, pulling up with its usual groan. I hesitated, lingering. Go, Emily, he said, his voice gentle, steady. Take these lessons with you. Don't just hear them, live them. Notice the people around you, the stories waiting to be told, the moments waiting to be felt. Life is fragile, and it is beautiful. Don't waste it being blind. I nodded, my heart pounding with a mixture of gratitude and awe. I stepped onto the bus slowly, glancing back. He tipped his hat to me, a gesture that seemed small but felt monumental. And as the bus carried me into the steel and glass towers, the hum of the city, and the fluorescent lights of my office, I realized something profound. My life wasn't just about the chaos, the emails, the endless motion. It was about noticing, listening, learning, feeling. I felt awake, alive. And for the first time in years, I was ready to truly begin. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't hit snooze or drag myself out of bed with a sense of dread. Instead, I lingered for a moment, letting the early light spill over my apartment floor, listening to the distant hum of the city. The world felt different. I dressed quickly but thoughtfully, noticing the colors of my clothes, the small details I had never cared about before. I took my time drinking my coffee, savoring the warmth and the aroma instead of gulping it down like a fuel for survival. And then I left. The bus stop was quiet that morning. The old man was there, of course, sitting with his coffee and that same calm presence. But this time, I saw the little things. The way a pigeon paused near his feet, the way the sun glanced off the wet pavement, the gentle smile he gave a stranger walking past. It was all alive. Morning, Emily, he said, nodding. Looks like someone's in a good mood today. I smiled genuinely, a little wider than I expected. I feel different, I admitted, I think I understand what you mean. I noticed things, people, moments, and it's refreshing. He chuckled softly. Refreshing, huh? Life has a funny way of reminding us what matters, even when we're too busy to see it. I walked to the bus with him, and as I waited, I felt a strange sense of patience. The bus could arrive any moment, or it could be late. Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't rushing anymore. I was seeing, observing, breathing. At work, things felt different too. Emails were still there, deadlines were still looming, but I approached them with a quiet clarity. I listened more carefully to my colleagues, offered a smile here, a genuine, "How are you?" there. People noticed. They smiled back. Small conversations bloomed into moments of connection I had never bothered to nurture before. It was the little things, just as he had said. A nod to a stranger, a thank you to the janitor cleaning the floor, a pause to watch a child run past the office building laughing. It all mattered. I noticed. I connected. I felt alive. And I carried the old man's words with me like a map. Patience, kindness, courage, listening, noticing. I realized that life wasn't just the chaos I had survived through. It was full of stories waiting to be heard, lessons waiting to be learned, and moments waiting to be felt. By the time evening came, I found myself back at the bus stop. He was there, of course, and I sat beside him without hesitation. We didn't speak immediately. We just watched the city move, lights blinking in the dusk, the hum of traffic like a soft symphony. "See that woman?" he said, nodding toward a woman helping her child cross the street. "She's teaching her kid courage. See that man opening the door for the elderly lady? Kindness. Everyone is giving lessons every day, Emily. You just have to notice them." I nodded, smiling. "I think I'm starting to," I said quietly. "I notice now." He chuckled softly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Good. That's all I ask. And remember, it doesn't stop here. Noticing is a skill, a practice, and the more you do it, the more life becomes full." For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Not because my job was easier, or my city was calmer, or my life had fewer problems, but because I was awake to it all. Awake to the small miracles, awake to the stories, awake to the lessons that had been around me all along. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the bus stop, the old man, and the city alive with unseen stories, and I realized something profound. I had been blind, and now I could see. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Every morning, the bus stop had become something more than a place to wait. It had become a classroom, not one with walls or blackboards, but one alive with lessons hidden in the hum of the city, in the lives of people passing by, and in the stories of a man I had come to regard as a teacher. I arrived earlier than usual that Thursday, coffee steaming in my hands, scarf wrapped tight around my neck. The old man was there already, sitting on the familiar bench, hat tilted slightly, eyes scanning the street as if he were reading the city like a book. "Morning, Emily," he said, nodding. "Ready for another lesson?" I smiled. "I think I'm ready for whatever you're willing to teach today." He chuckled softly, the sound warm and steady. "Good. Let's begin." He spoke first about patience again, but in a new way. Not the patience of waiting for a bus, but the patience of life itself. The patience of watching a child take their first steps, of seeing someone recover from heartbreak, of witnessing kindness ripple quietly through the streets. Each person I passed on my commute now had a story, a struggle, a victory that went unnoticed by the hurried crowd. "You see that woman?" he asked, pointing across the street to a mother juggling groceries and a stroller. "She's teaching her child resilience without ever knowing it. That man holding the door for her, patience. Small acts, Emily. That's where the real lessons are." I began to notice things I had never seen before. The way the barista smiled at a regular customer, the way the city bus swerved to avoid a cyclist, the way pigeons paused on the pavement as if the world belonged to them for a fleeting moment. Each detail became a thread in a tapestry of life I had been blind to for too long. The old man began sharing stories from his younger days, stories of friends he had lost, moments of quiet courage, nights spent under the stars, thinking about what really mattered. He spoke of people he had met, strangers who had changed the course of his life with a single gesture or word. And as he spoke, I realized that the world itself was teaching me, if only I would listen. I started to take notes in my mind, remembering his words and watching the people around me. The bus stop became my observatory, the city a living classroom. I practiced empathy, imagining the lives of the strangers hurrying past, recognizing their silent battles and small victories. One morning, a young man dropped his folder in the puddle. Without thinking, I helped him pick it up. He smiled, and I realized I felt something I hadn't in years: connection. The old man's lessons were already taking root. "See," he said, noticing my small act. "Every day teaches you something, Emily. You just have to pay attention. Some lessons are loud, some quiet, but they're all there, waiting for you to notice." And I did. I noticed the old man's worn shoes and the small tremble in his hands. I noticed the couple arguing quietly by the corner, their anger masking something deeper. I noticed the young girl holding a baby, her eyes tired but full of determination. I noticed the subtle rhythms of the city, the unseen kindness, the quiet resilience. By the end of that week, I realized something remarkable. My world had expanded. The city that once felt overwhelming, noisy, and impersonal now felt alive with stories. Each person had value, each moment had meaning, and I had the privilege of learning from it all. The bus stop had become a place of wonder, a place of learning, a place where I could connect not only with him, the old man, but with the pulse of life itself. And in that space, I began to understand the quiet truth he had been teaching me all along. Life's lessons aren't always in textbooks, offices, or grand speeches. They're in the people, moments, and choices we pass by every day. That night, walking home, I felt a sense of gratitude so profound it made my chest ache. I had discovered a world of learning hiding in plain sight, and I knew I would never look at a bus stop or the people around me the same way again. It started with small things: a smile to the janitor in my office building, holding the door for the stranger behind me, offering to grab coffee for a coworker buried under spreadsheets. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I began noticing the ripples, the way a smile returned, a nod of appreciation, a thank you that lingered just a little longer. The old man's lessons had become alive in me: patience, kindness, courage, listening, noticing. These weren't just words anymore. They were ways of living, and as I practiced them, I realized that life was richer, deeper, more meaningful. One morning, waiting at the bus stop, I saw a young mother struggling with a stroller and grocery bags. I rushed over instinctively, helping her lift the packages and steady the stroller. She looked at me, exhausted and frazzled, and said simply, "Thank you. You don't know how much that helps." I did know, or at least I knew something about the feeling of being seen, of being helped when no one expects it. And as I watched her walk away, I felt a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in years. At work, I started noticing more than just tasks. I listened to colleagues with intent, noticing their stress, their struggles, their small victories. A coworker confided in me about a difficult family situation. I listened, really listened, and offered support where I could. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't dramatic, but it mattered. To them. And in some small way, to me too. The bus stop became my classroom, not just for learning, but for giving back. I offered a seat to someone weary, shared a smile with the quiet man reading his paper, and even started small conversations with the people I had once overlooked. It was incredible how people responded to attention, to noticing, to being acknowledged. One afternoon, the old man nodded at me knowingly. "See, Emily? The lessons don't just stay with you. They move, they travel, they reach places you'll never know. That's the beauty of noticing. That's the beauty of living with awareness." I realized he was right. The more I practiced, the more life revealed itself. Small acts of courage, kindness, and patience multiplied. Stories unfolded around me everywhere I looked. I had become part of the unseen web of life, connecting in ways I hadn't even imagined. Even my own perspective on my work shifted. The deadlines, the emails, the meetings, they hadn't disappeared, but they felt different. I approached problems calmly, offered help without expectation, and noticed the humanity behind every interaction. I was no longer just surviving the city. I was living in it, truly living. And as the days passed, I began to understand the ripple effect he had spoken about. My small gestures inspired others, smiles were returned, help was offered, conversations deepened. People noticed one another more, in ways big and small. The lessons were spreading, quietly, gently, in ways I could never fully measure. The bus stop, once a place of waiting, had become a place of transformation. For me, for others. And I realized that the old man's greatest gift was not just the stories he shared, but the way he had shown me how to notice, how to live, and how to pass on those lessons. That evening, as I walked home, the city felt alive in a new way. I saw it not as a chaotic maze, but as a network of lives, of stories, of lessons waiting to be discovered and shared, and I felt, with a quiet certainty, that I had found my place, not just in the city, but in the flow of life itself. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the skyscrapers in shades of gold and rose. I found myself walking to the bus stop, a soft breeze ruffling my hair, my heart lighter than it had felt in years. The city hummed around me, but I no longer felt lost in the noise. I felt part of it, connected to the stories and lives moving around me, invisible threads weaving us all together. The old man was there, as always, sitting on the bench with his cup of coffee. He smiled when he saw me. "Emily," he said, "you've been busy noticing." "I have," I said, taking a seat beside him. "Every day, everything feels different. The city, the people, even myself. I feel like I see life now in a way I never did before." He nodded, quiet and satisfied. "That's because you've learned to pay attention. Life doesn't shout its lessons. It whispers in the small moments, the subtle acts, the quiet gestures. And you've listened." I thought about the weeks that had passed, how I had watched the city, the people, the struggles and victories that often go unnoticed, how I had begun to practice patience, kindness, courage, and empathy, how I had started connecting with people in ways I never imagined, and how, in doing so, I had found a new version of myself, a version awake, alive, and aware. You know, he said softly, sometimes the people who change your life the most are the ones you barely notice at first. Sometimes it's a stranger on a bench, a face in the crowd, a voice in passing. But if you pay attention, you'll find the lessons hiding in the ordinary. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle deep in my chest. I understand now, I whispered. And I think I've finally learned to live. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. The lights flickered on, one by one, casting soft reflections on the wet streets. The bus arrived, groaning to a stop, but this time I didn't rush. I lingered, savoring the moment, grateful for the lessons, grateful for the stories, grateful for the chance to see life in a new light. He stood slowly, tipping his hat to me. Remember, Emily, noticing is a choice. Living is a choice. And the more you choose it, the richer life becomes. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I knew I would never forget them. As he walked away, I realized that the bus stop, the same place I had passed every day without thinking, had become a sanctuary of understanding, a classroom without walls, a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And for the first time in my life, I felt complete, not because the city had changed, or my job had become easier, or life had become less complicated, but because I had changed. I had opened my eyes, my heart, and my mind. I had learned to notice, to listen, to connect, to live. And in that quiet, unremarkable corner of the city, I understood the truth I had been searching for all along. Life's most profound lessons are often hidden in the smallest moments, waiting for someone to pay attention. And I had finally learned to see them. I stood, watching the city pulse around me, and felt a quiet joy swell inside. For the first time, I wasn't just moving through life. I was truly living it.